We are now in the final week of the 2026 World Cup. Big games, drama, remontada, heartbreak. But the World Cup didn't start like this. This is the entire history of the FIFA World Cup. In 1928, FIFA president Jules Rimet decided to switch from the Olympics and create the most brilliant idea in football history: a football competition between the countries of the world. Not just a small tournament where football was treated like one sport among many. No. This was going to be different. One competition, one trophy, one world champion, the game of cups, where nations fight for the right to say, we are the best football country in the world. Yeah, no thanks. Well, a lot of countries were seeing it's a waste of time and money. But even if most countries ignored it, FIFA still went ahead. And 2 years later, the first ever World Cup was born. Uruguay, 1930. Uruguay took the lead and hosted the competition. Why Uruguay? Because at the time, they were already Olympic champions. They were celebrating 100 years of independence and they were ready to host the whole thing, which sounds great. Until you remember one small problem: Uruguay is in South America. That didn't mean booking a quick flight. That meant spending weeks on a ship just to play football? Yeah, no thanks. So the first World Cup didn't start with 48 teams. It started with only 13 countries. 7 from South America, 4 from Europe, and 2 from North America. No Africa, no Asia, no giant opening ceremony, no sponsors everywhere, no players arriving with designer sunglasses and headphones. Just 13 teams, a trophy, and a new idea that almost nobody believed in yet. The tournament kicked off on July 13th, 1930, and the format was simple: 4 groups. The winners go to the semifinals, then the final. And in that final, the host nation Uruguay faced their biggest rival, Argentina. This was not just a football match. This was South American pride. A packed stadium, 2 rivals, 1 first world title. Argentina even led at halftime, but Uruguay came back. And in front of around 93,000 people, they beat Argentina 4-2, becoming the first ever World Cup champions. Uruguay lifted the trophy. FIFA had its proof. But the next tournaments would prove something much darker, because as the World Cup grew, it didn't just attract football fans, it attracted politicians, dictators, propaganda, national pride, and countries that didn't just want to win a trophy. They wanted to use football to show power. So, before the World Cup became the beautiful global festival we know today, it became something else, a stage for politics. And the first country to really understand that was Italy. 4 years later, in 1934, the World Cup moved to Italy. The tournament started growing fast. More countries wanted in. More teams meant more games. And for the first time, teams actually had to qualify. So on paper, the World Cup was becoming bigger. But there was one man who didn't see this tournament as just football: Benito Mussolini, the dictator of Italy, the leader of the fascist party. And fascism was not just a normal political party. It was nationalism, control, propaganda, and power. So when Mussolini looked at the World Cup, he didn't just see players running after a ball. He saw a weapon, a chance to tell the world, look at Italy, look how strong we are, look how organized we are, look how powerful we are. Italy opened the tournament by destroying the United States 7-1. Then they survived Spain, then Austria. The host nation was getting closer to the final. And in the final, they faced Czechoslovakia. For Mussolini, this was supposed to be the perfect ending. The dictator watching, the world paying attention. But then Czechoslovakia scored first, and for a moment, the whole story almost collapsed. The host nation was losing in Rome in Mussolini's tournament, but Italy came back. They equalized near the end. Then, in extra time, they scored again. Italy won 2-1. They became the first European World Cup champions, and Mussolini got exactly what he wanted, not just a trophy, but a propaganda victory. But if 1934 showed that politics could enter the World Cup, 1938 would show that it could get even darker. 4 years later, in 1938, the World Cup moved to France. But not everyone was happy. South America expected the tournament to come back to them, but FIFA kept it in Europe. So Uruguay and Argentina said, "We're not coming." And the tournament started with only 15 teams. Why 15? Because Austria had qualified, but before the World Cup started, Austria was annexed by Nazi Germany. And that tells you everything about the world at that time. Football was still being played, but Europe was getting closer and closer to war. And in the middle of all of this, Italy came back, the defending champions, still ruled by Mussolini. So every Italian match felt political. Italy beat Norway, then France, then Brazil. And suddenly, they were in the final again. Italy versus Hungary, and this is where one of the darkest legends in World Cup history appears. Before the final, Mussolini reportedly sent the Italian team a message. 3 words: win or die. Now, maybe it was real, maybe it was exaggerated, but the fact that people believed it shows you the kind of pressure Italy were playing under. This was not just a final, this was football mixed with fear. Italy won 4-2, back-to-back World Cups, the first country to defend the title. And after the match, Hungary's goalkeeper was famously quoted saying, "I may have conceded 4 goals, but at least I saved their lives." And then, after Italy won in 1938, FIFA probably started thinking, where should we host the next World Cup? World War II. Millions died, Europe was destroyed, and suddenly, football didn't feel that important anymore. So the World Cup disappeared. No 1942 tournament, no 1946 tournament, just 12 years of silence. The World Cup finally came back, 1950, Brazil. The war was over, but the world was still broken. Europe was recovering, countries were rebuilding, and football was trying to come back to life. This tournament was supposed to feel like a fresh start, and for Brazil, it looked like the perfect story. They were hosting it, they had the Maracanã, they had the crowd, and in the final match against Uruguay, Brazil didn't even need to win. A draw was enough to become world champions, and when Brazil scored first, the whole country started celebrating early. But Uruguay didn't care about the script. They scored once, then scored again. Brazil won, Uruguay too, and suddenly, the Maracanã went silent. Uruguay won the World Cup, and Brazil lost it at home. The World Cup had returned by breaking an entire country's heart. And if 1950 was heartbreak, 1954 was pure chaos. This was the highest scoring World Cup ever. Goals everywhere. Defenders were basically just there for decoration. But one team looked unstoppable, Hungary. They had one of the greatest teams football had ever seen. They were destroying everyone. They even beat West Germany 8-3 earlier in the tournament. So when Hungary reached the final against that same West Germany, it looked obvious. Hungary were going to win. And after just 8 minutes, they were already 2-0 up. Game over, right? One of the biggest shocks in World Cup history. Germany called it the miracle of Bern. And Hungary, one of the greatest teams ever, left the World Cup with nothing. And then came 1958, Sweden, and this World Cup gave football something new, not just a champion, but a superstar. A 17-year-old Brazilian kid named Pelé. At the start, he was just a teenager. By the end, he looked like the future of football. Brazil had never won the World Cup before. They had already lost the heartbreak of 1950 at home. But this time, everything was different. Pelé scored in the quarterfinal, then scored a hat-trick in the semi-final. And in the final against Sweden, he scored twice. Brazil won 5-2, their first ever World Cup, and Pelé became the youngest player to win it. But the crazy thing is, this was not even his full story yet, because 1958 was only the beginning. Brazil had finally become world champions, and 4 years later, Brazil came back to prove this was not luck. 1962, Chile. Brazil arrived as world champions, and all eyes were on Pelé. Because after what he did in 1958, people expected him to take over the tournament again. And at first, it looked like he was going to do exactly that. In Brazil's opening game against Mexico, Pelé scored, everything looked normal, the king was back. But then, in the second game, Pelé got injured. And suddenly, Brazil lost their biggest star. For most teams, that would be the end of the story. But not for Brazil. Because this team was too good, Garrincha stepped up, Vava stepped up, and Brazil kept winning. They reached the final against Czechoslovakia and won 3-1. World champions again. And even without Pelé on the pitch for most of the tournament, his story with Brazil got even bigger, because now the world understood something. Brazil was not just Pelé. Brazil was becoming a football empire. But if Brazil were becoming a football empire, 1966 took the World Cup to England. And this one had drama before the tournament even started. Because the World Cup trophy was stolen. Yes, the actual trophy, the biggest prize in football. Police searched for it. People panicked. And then the hero who found it was... A dog named Pickles found the trophy wrapped in newspaper under a bush. So before England even won the World Cup, a random dog had already saved it. But on the pitch, England were serious. They reached the final against West Germany. The match ended 2-2 after 90 minutes. Then extra time came, and England scored twice. Final score, England 4, West Germany 2. England won their first World Cup at home. Then came 1970 with Mexico, the first World Cup held in North America. And this time, Brazil came back with what many people still call the greatest team ever. Pelé was back. And this was his last World Cup. Brazil reached the final against Italy. And honestly, Italy were good. But Brazil were Brazil. They won 4-1. Pelé lifted his third World Cup. Brazil became the first country to win it 3 times. And because of that, they kept the original trophy forever. At this point, Brazil were not just winning World Cups, they were becoming the face of the World Cup. 4 years later, 1974, West Germany, and this World Cup introduced a new trophy. Because Brazil had kept the old one, this tournament was all about one team, the Netherlands. They played total football, fast, smart, beautiful. And in the final, they faced West Germany. The Netherlands scored first, before Germany even touched the ball. But West Germany came back. They won 2-1. The beautiful team lost. The efficient team won, and Germany lifted the new World Cup trophy for the first time. Then came 1978, Argentina. And once again, the World Cup was surrounded by politics. Argentina was under a military dictatorship. So this tournament felt bigger than football from the start. On the pitch, Argentina reached the final against the Netherlands. And for the Netherlands, this was their second final in a row. Second chance, second dream, second heartbreak. Argentina won 3-1 after extra time. The host nation lifted the trophy. The Netherlands lost another final, and the World Cup had again proved one thing: beautiful football does not always win. And then came 1982, Spain, and this was the moment the World Cup got bigger. For the first time, the tournament expanded from 16 teams to 24. More countries, more games, more chaos. And honestly, it didn't take long for the chaos to arrive. In a match between France and Kuwait, France scored a goal. Normal, right? But Kuwait's players stopped because they thought they heard the referee's whistle. The goal counted. Kuwait got angry. And then suddenly, a Kuwaiti prince came down from the stands, walked onto the pitch, spoke to the referee. And somehow, the goal was cancelled. That might be one of the weirdest moments in World Cup history. But while all that drama was happening, Italy were building something serious. At first, they didn't look that special. But then came Paolo Rossi, Against Brazil, one of the most beautiful teams in the tournament, Rossi scored a hat-trick. Italy beat Brazil 3-2, and just like that, the team everyone loved to watch was gone. Italy reached the final against West Germany, and this time there was no miracle comeback. Italy won 3-1. Paolo Rossi became the hero. Italy became world champions for the third time. And the 1982 World Cup proved one thing. More teams meant more stories, but also way more madness. But if 1982 gave us madness, 1986 gave us something even crazier. One man who cheated and became a genius in the same game. 1986 Mexico. And this World Cup belonged to Diego Maradona. Argentina had a good team, but Maradona made it feel like he was controlling the whole tournament by himself. And the match that made him immortal was against England. And this was not just football, because only a few years earlier, Argentina and Britain had been at war over the Falkland Islands. So when these two teams met, the match already felt heavy. Then Maradona scored one of the most controversial goals in football history. A cross came into the box. Maradona jumped. The goalkeeper came out, and somehow the ball ended up in the net. At first, it looked like a header. But then the replay showed the truth. He had punched it in with his hand. The referee didn't see it. The goal counted. And Maradona later called it the hand of God. So yeah, Argentina were leading because of one of the most famous cheats in World Cup history. But then, just 4 minutes later, Maradona did something nobody could complain about. He picked up the ball near the halfway line, ran through England's midfield, past defender, then went past the goalkeeper and scored one of the greatest goals ever in the same match. Maradona gave the world cheating and genius. Argentina won that game. Then they reached the final against West Germany, and in the final, Argentina won 3-2. Maradona lifted the trophy, and the 1986 World Cup became his World Cup. Not because he was perfect, but because he was unforgettable. But 4 years later, Argentina and Germany met again, 1990, Italy. And this World Cup was not as beautiful as 1986. It was defensive, low scoring, and honestly, not the most exciting tournament ever. But it still had big moments. Cameroon shocked the world by reaching the quarterfinals, becoming the first African team to go that far in a World Cup. Argentina somehow reached another final, same two countries, but this time, Germany got revenge. They won 1-0 with a late penalty. Argentina ended the match with 9 men. Maradona cried, and West Germany became world champions. 4 years later, in 1994, the World Cup moved to the United States and gave us one of the darkest stories football has ever seen. At first, this tournament looked like a celebration. Big stadiums, huge crowds, a World Cup in a country that didn't even call the sport football. And somehow, it worked. The stadiums were packed. The tournament felt massive. But behind all that noise, 1994 had a very dark side. Maradona came back for one last dance, scored, celebrated like a madman, and then got kicked out of the tournament after failing a drug test.
The player Diego Maradona of the Argentinian national team has therefore violated the provisions of the doping control regulations in the match Argentina-Nigeria.
Argentina lost their icon, but Colombia lost something much bigger. Colombia came into this World Cup with huge expectations. People believed this was their golden generation, but in a group stage match against the United States, their captain, Andrés Escobar, accidentally scored an own goal. Colombia were knocked out early, and when Escobar returned home, he was murdered.
Respects to the World Cup star murdered for scoring an own goal. Andrés Escobar was shot dead by a gang angry that his error had put Colombia out of the competition.
All because of a football mistake. A World Cup own goal became a death sentence. It was one of the darkest moments in the history of the tournament. But the World Cup kept moving. Brazil reached the final against Italy. Two giants, two football nations. But the game itself was not a classic 90 minutes. No goals, extra time. Still no goals. So for the first time ever, a World Cup final was decided by penalties. Roberto Baggio stepped up for Italy, one of the best players in the world, and he missed.
El silencio invadió todas las casas de Italia. Sobre el campo, Roberto Baggio miraba hacia el suelo con los brazos.
Brazil won the shootout. They became world champions for the fourth time. But even with Brazil lifting the trophy, 1994 would always be remembered for something much heavier. The World Cup that showed how football pressure can become deadly. 4 years later, 1998, France. And this World Cup changed the tournament again. For the first time, it expanded to 32 teams. More countries, more groups, a bigger World Cup, basically the version most of us grew up watching. And this tournament gave us a final that looked perfect on paper, Brazil versus France. But just hours before the final, something strange happened. Ronaldo reportedly suffered a seizure. For a moment, he was not even supposed to start the match. Then suddenly, his name was back in the starting 11. Nobody really knew what was going on. And when the game started, Ronaldo didn't look like Ronaldo. He'd looked lost, almost like a different player. And on the other side, Zidane chose the biggest night of his life to become a national hero. He scored once, then scored again, 2 headers. In a World Cup final, France won 3-0. They became world champions for the first time, at home. And while Brazil left with questions, France left with a legend. But Brazil were not done. 2002, South Korea and Japan. The first World Cup ever hosted in Asia, and the first one hosted by 2 countries. This tournament had surprises everywhere. Senegal shocked France in the opening match. South Korea went all the way to the semifinals. And the World Cup suddenly felt more global than ever. But the main story was Brazil. Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, the 3 R's. Brazil looked dangerous again, and Ronaldo looked like a man trying to erase the nightmare of 1998. 4 years earlier, he looked broken in the final. But this time, he looked unstoppable. Brazil reached the final against Germany, and Ronaldo scored twice. Brazil won 2-0, their 5th World Cup, the most in history. And Ronaldo finished the tournament as top scorer. But 4 years later, the World Cup would give us another final built around one superstar. 2006, Germany. This World Cup had cards everywhere, tackles flying, players arguing, and one match between Portugal and the Netherlands became so crazy. People started calling it the Battle of Nuremberg. 4 red cards. A ridiculous number of yellow cards. Basically 90 minutes of football turning into a street fight. But even with all that chaos, the tournament is remembered for one moment. The final, Italy versus France. For France, this was supposed to be Zidane's perfect goodbye. His last game, his last World Cup. It looked like he might actually do it. Zidane scored a beautiful penalty. Italy answered with a header from Materazzi. 1-1, extra time. Zidane and Materazzi were walking next to each other. Materazzi grabbed Zidane's shirt. Zidane looked at him and said, "If you want my shirt, I'll give it to you after the match." And Materazzi basically replied, "I'd rather have your sister." Zidane stopped, turned around, and boom, headbutt, red card. His last ever football match ended like that. The match went to penalties. Italy won, their 4th World Cup. And 2006 became the World Cup where one of football's greatest legends left the game with a red card. 2010, South Africa. And this World Cup was special before the ball even moved, because for the first time ever, the tournament was hosted in Africa. The stadiums were loud, the vuvuzelas were even louder, and the ball, the Jabulani. Players hated it, goalkeepers feared it, and every shot looked like it had its own plans. But the biggest heartbreak of this tournament belonged to Ghana. They were one penalty away from becoming the first African team to reach a World Cup semi-final. The ball was going in. history was about to happen, and then Luis Suarez stopped it with his hand. Red card, penalty for Ghana. One kick to make African football history. Asamoah stepped up and hit the crossbar. Ghana lost on penalties, Uruguay survived. And one of the most emotional World Cup dreams ended in the cruelest way possible. But in the final, it was Spain versus the Netherlands. The Netherlands were chasing their first World Cup. Spain were chasing their first World Cup too. And the match was ugly, tackles everywhere. Yellow cards everywhere. The Netherlands basically tried to turn tiki-taka into a crime scene. But after 116 minutes, Andres Iniesta found the space. One touch, one shot. Goal. Spain won 1-0, their first World Cup ever, and 2010 became the World Cup of noise, chaos, heartbreak, and one perfect Spanish moment. 2014 Brazil. And this one felt different because the World Cup was not just going to a football country. It was going to the football country, Brazil, the land of Pelé, samba football, 5 World Cups, and a nation that didn't just want to win, they expected to win. But before Brazil's dream even collapsed, the tournament was already going crazy. The defending champions, Spain, arrived with the same golden generation that had dominated football for years. But in their first match, the Netherlands destroyed them 5-1, and Van Persie scored that flying header. Spain, the champions of the world, were basically finished before the tournament even started. Then came Suarez, Uruguay versus Italy, a normal World Cup match until Luis Suarez decided to bite Giorgio Chiellini. Yes, bite in a World Cup match. At this point, the tournament was not even trying to be normal anymore, and while all this chaos was happening, one young player was becoming a star, James Rodriguez, Colombia's number 10. He scored one of the best goals of the tournament against Uruguay. Chest, turn, volley, goal, a perfect World Cup moment. James finished as the top scorer, and for a few weeks, he looked like the next face of football. But the main story was still Brazil. Neymar was carrying the country. Every match felt like the whole nation was on his shoulders, and Brazil kept moving forward. Then came the quarter-final against Colombia. Neymar got hit in the back. He went down. And just like that, Brazil lost their biggest star. And it got worse. Their captain, Thiago Silva, was suspended for the semi-final. So Brazil went into the biggest match of their tournament without their best attacker and without their leader. The opponent? Germany. And what happened next did not feel real. Semi-final. Brazil versus Germany. In Brazil. In front of Brazil. With the whole country watching. Germany scored once. Okay, bad start. Then they scored again. Then again. Then again. Then again. 5 goals in the first half. Brazil were not losing. Brazil were being erased. People in the stands were crying. Players looked broken. The commentators didn't even know how to react. And during that destruction, Miroslav Klose scored his 16th World Cup goal, becoming the top scorer in World Cup history. By the end, it was Brazil 1, Germany 7, a scoreline so brutal it didn't look like football. And Germany moved to the final. Waiting for them there, Argentina. For Messi, this was the chance to do what Maradona did, the chance to win the trophy that would complete everything. The final was tight, nervous, physical. Argentina had chances, Germany had chances, but after 90 minutes, no goals, extra time. Then Andre Schürrle ran down the left side, crossed the ball into the box, and Mario Götze controlled it with his chest. Left foot volley, goal. Germany 1, Argentina 0. Messi watched the trophy slip away. Germany won their 4th World Cup, and for the first time ever, a European country won the World Cup in South America. Brazil hosted the party. Argentina came close to stealing it, but Germany left with the trophy. '18 Russia, and this World Cup was not as iconic as 2014, but it still felt like football was changing. VAR arrived at the World Cup. This tournament also started with a warning. The old giants were not safe anymore. Germany came in as defending champions and somehow finished bottom of their group. The team that destroyed Brazil 7-1 4 years earlier couldn't even survive the group stage. Spain had drama, Argentina were messy, Brazil were good but not special. And while the big names were struggling, new stories started to appear. Cristiano Ronaldo opened the tournament with a hat trick against Spain, including that perfect free kick at the end. For one night, it felt like Ronaldo was playing against an entire country by himself. England also had their best run in years. The fans started singing, and for a moment, they actually believed it. But then Croatia happened. Croatia were tired. They kept going to extra time. They kept surviving. And somehow they kept winning. Led by Luka Modric, this small country pushed all the way to the final, their first ever World Cup final. But waiting for them there was France. And France had everything: experience, power, speed, and a teenager named Kylian Mbappé, who looked like he was running in fast forward. The final was chaotic. An own goal, a VAR penalty, a Lloris mistake. Croatia kept fighting, but France had too much. Final score, France 4, Croatia 2. France won their second World Cup. 20 years after Zidane made them champions in 1998, a new French generation took the crown, and Mbappé announced himself as the future. 2022, Qatar. And this World Cup was different before it even started. For the first time, it was hosted in the Middle East. And because of Qatar's heat, the tournament moved from summer to November and December. In the middle of the club season, surrounded by controversy before a ball was even kicked. But once the football started, Qatar 2022 became chaos immediately. Argentina played their first match against Saudi Arabia, and everyone expected Argentina to win easily. Messi scored first. Everything looked normal, and then suddenly 2 goals. Argentina lost 2-1, one of the biggest shocks in World Cup history. And for a moment, Messi's dream looked like it might die before it even started. But that was just the beginning. Because this World Cup had surprises everywhere. Germany lost to Japan. Spain lost to Japan. Japan somehow beat 2 former world champions and topped their group. Germany were knocked out early again, back-to-back disasters. And then came Morocco. For Morocco, this World Cup became history. They topped the group with Croatia, Belgium, and Canada. Then they faced Spain. 120 minutes, no goals, penalties. And suddenly, Achraf Hakimi stepped up with 1 penalty to send Morocco to the quarterfinals, and he chipped it. A Panenka, cold, calm, disrespectful in the most beautiful way. Morocco knocked out Spain. Then came Portugal. Cristiano Ronaldo started on the bench. Portugal had stars everywhere, but Morocco had belief, and when Youssef and Nesri jumped into the air, it looked like he stayed there longer than gravity allowed. Header. Goal. Morocco beat Portugal 1-0 and became the first African team and the first Arab team to reach a World Cup semi-final. For Morocco, this was not just football. This was the whole Arab world and Africa watching one team say, "We belong here." But while Morocco were writing history, the biggest story was still Messi, because this was probably his last real chance. He had won everything: Champions Leagues, Ballon d'Or, Copa America, but the World Cup was still missing. And after that Saudi Arabia loss, Argentina changed. They became more aggressive, more dangerous. Messi started playing like a man who knew this was the final chapter. Against Mexico, he saved them. Against Australia, he controlled everything. Against the Netherlands, the match turned into chaos, goals, extra time, arguments, players fighting, and Argentina survived. Then, in the semi-final, they faced Croatia, the team that broke Brazil's heart on penalties. Again, Brazil left the World Cup with tears, but against Argentina, Croatia had nothing left. Messi destroyed them, and Julian Alvarez ran through them. Messi was in the final, waiting for him there. France, the defending champions, the team of Mbappé, and this final might be the greatest football match ever played. Argentina started perfectly. Messi scored a penalty. Di Maria scored a beautiful second goal. France looked dead for 80 minutes. France had nothing. No rhythm, no danger, no answers. Argentina were 2-0 up. Messi was almost touching the trophy.
Who decided that?
Mbappé happened. Penalty, goal. 1 minute later. Volley. Goal. 2-2. Out of nowhere. The final was alive again. Extra time. Messi scored. Argentina 3, France 2. It felt done again. Messi had written the perfect ending, but Mbappé refused to leave the story. Another penalty. Hat-trick. In a World Cup final. 3-3. Messi and Mbappé were not just playing a match anymore. They were fighting for history. And then, France almost stole the entire story. One long ball, one chance. Colomwani was through. The whole stadium held its breath. If he scored, France would win the World Cup. Mbappe's comeback would become immortal. Messi's dream would collapse. Colomwani shot, and Emiliano Martinez somehow saved it. One leg, one impossible save. The kind of save that doesn't just stop a goal. It saves a country's dream. Then came penalties. Argentina scored. France missed. Emiliano Martinez became the villain France hated and the hero Argentina needed. And finally, Argentina won. Messi lifted the World Cup. After all the heartbreak, after all the pressure, after all the years of people saying he needed this trophy, he finally had it. Qatar 2022 started with controversy. It gave us shocks, Japan's madness, Morocco's miracle, Brazil's heartbreak, Ronaldo's sad ending, Mbappe's final hat-trick, Martinez's impossible save, and Messi's perfect last chapter. And after 92 years of World Cup history, the tournament gave us one of its greatest endings ever.